Righty-ho. Well, we have a very small group with us tonight, so you could put your cameras and your microphones on because one of the purposes of this was to see if anybody learnt anything new this month or in the last 6 months, year, 10 years, that other people might be interested in finding out about. So I thought before I launch into anything, I thought I would see if there's anybody who's found anything exciting that might like to share.
Unfortunately, no.
No?
No.
No long lost rallies? No brick walls knocked over?
No.
So hopefully you can all see this. So
Chinese, Holly.
yes, so one of the things I did when I was up in Auckland was I had a lovely chat with a lady from the New Zealand Chinese Poll Tax Heritage Trust. I'm trying to remember to say those words in the right order. And she had a big chat with me about Chinese families, and if you find some researching them. And one of the things she pointed out was they have these amazing family history books. So this is one example, and I'll just scroll down a bit more. And there's another one. They've got different names and they have different things in them, but they all have these huge lineages in them, tracing you back miles and miles and miles. So if you discover a Chinese ancestor in your family tree, this is what you need to do, is find the cousin who's got this. And then hopefully they'll be able to read it for you because it is in traditional Chinese. And so having talked to the lady from the New Zealand Chinese Poll Tax Heritage Trust, we've actually added a little extra page onto the Kiwi resources about Chinese in New Zealand and a little bit of how to search your family. One of the interesting things that she told me was that if you find the headstone for a person, it will probably include their hometown in China. So, which, you know, we always say that's the hard bit, is to find out where they came from. But that was very interesting. So if you haven't had a chance to look in the Kiwi resources, you do need to be logged in. See, logged in up the top. We've got all sorts of things in there, but if there's anything you've used and you've found really good that you think's missing, get in touch and we'll add it in, because we want to make this as big as we can. Now, the other thing I did when I was in Auckland was I went to a talk by Family Search, and I had a chat with the guys there because we talk with them quite a bit, and they reminded me about the Family Search labs. Now, this is the screen you see once you've logged into Family Search, and you can see it's just familysearch.org/labs will get you there. One of the things they've got here is the full text search, and if you click on go to the experiment, you can start. Now, one thing I discovered is that if you're like me and you have an O'Callaghan or an O'Brien or anything with an O apostrophe, you need to leave that bit off because it doesn't do it. But it comes up with all these records where it's searching every single word in the record. And then if you click on collection and scroll down a bit, you'll see a couple of Australian ones there, and I had some great success in Victoria. But you scroll down a little bit further and you'll get the New Zealand probate records. Now, it does seem to be divvied up by area, but quite frankly, it does seem to pull up the whole lot when you pull it. So once you've gotten here, you can start scrolling through. Now, a lot of them are going to be the name of the person who's deceased or their children and all this sorts of things. But if you are prepared to go through all 872 responses, you might find a family member who's got a bequest from a family friend, or a godparent that you didn't know was a godparent, or is the witness, or, as I discovered in Victoria, is witnessing an affidavit and providing information that you didn't know. So you can go through all of this, but it does go, you know, we'll search the probate collection, and so that's really cool. And if you're like me and you also have family in America, you can see that there's various state ones from America as well. So I had quite good fun playing in Pennsylvania because that's where my great-great-grandmother was born. in the wills and deeds. So the deeds are usually about land transfers. So that was really cool to discover. My 3 times great grandparents buying and selling a piece of land and then looking it up on the map to see where it was in a little town in Pennsylvania. You know, it is very American heavy, you can see by the number of states, but it's good to know that the New Zealand probate collections are in there. Now, one of the other things I went to see was Maggie Gaffney. So she's a person here in Wellington who's she's convener of the Lower North Island Irish Interest Group. And so she did 2 talks, one on tithe records and in England and one on Irish ones, and discovered that there's quite a lot hidden around in Find My Past. So I've already put the search in here because I wanted to make sure I put the right search in the right thing. So I'm looking for a townland called Drumnafern, which is in County Tyrone, and it's got 2 results. And so this is the Griffiths valuation books, and it will bring up one. So these are the field books, and these are fascinating if you're interested in dirt. Anybody interested in dirt? Because they tell you, you know, who's got it. So we've got a chap there called Robert Kelly and James Stevenson. But then when we come in over here, we see clayey, arable, half stiff, and who knows what that is. Half
Cold.
more cold, you reckon? Could be. And cold, half more friable. The whole of moderate depth, half the lot steep and exposed grey sand subsoil. So if you really wanted to have an idea of how much bog there was in the land that your family were on, having a look on the field books that are contained on Find My Past, which you can search by townland, is a really cool thing to look at. Now, when I was poking around in Find My Past, I came across this one, the Maps and Surveys, and I just picked this one up, and I'm just going to pick randomly the top one, dated from 1583. Oh, this one isn't as pretty. Right, I'm sorry, picking another one. I saw one, and it was just gorgeous. Fermanagh. So they had these type of maps there. So this is the barony of oh, I'm not even going to bother trying to say it. Clinawley. But you can scroll right in. They're so well digitized, and it takes you down to the townland, and, you know, shows you where the rivers and the waterways and the big hills are. And there's Shank Hill. Don't know if it's this one in Belfast or whatever. So I just picked these out to show you because I thought they were really pretty, and that, you know, if you downloaded it, it might actually make a nice thing, you know, if your family came from that area, to get printed out and hang up on the wall. And the last thing I did was I found these survey maps and plans from the Griffith valuation, and I've already put a name in here, which is Caerduggan, which is where my great-great-grandfather came from. And there's a choice of one map. And we go into the picture. And so these maps, of course, are 19th century, and they've got the things in here. And oh yeah, it's over here. The Caerduggan area. So that's where the house is, which is a moulding ruin at the moment. Cousins have been to visit and taken photographs of these most spectacular rooms that are just sort of mouldering away, but it's got the farmhouse next to there. So, you know, you might find quite a bit of detail on where your family were living if you know the townland and Ireland. Now, another talk I went to up in Auckland was given by Dr. Sophie Kay, who was the keynote speaker of the conference, and she did one on alcoholism, which was quite fascinating because you don't really think about it. But one of the maps she brought up, and I've found this one, and I'm showing you this one because it's been digitized in an amazing degree. And I'm just going to
Mighty.
Scroll down. So the key, the ones in red, the ones that are crosses are Church of England, and then there are various types of nonconformist, are the other red ones. And the round circles and these are different types of outlets that sell alcohol. So this is the temperance map, as it was called, to give people an idea of how bad the situation was with alcohol in London in particular, in 1899 and 1900. And so there's a few variations on this, but it's something you could add if you had family in London to the booze poverty maps, which are useful for getting an idea of how wealthy or not people were. Now I'm just going to scroll out because I was going to show you one place in particular and I've lost it. Trouble with these big. Here we go. So in here in the middle, you can see Star Corner. That's where my family used to live in Bermondsey. And you can see they were nonconformists. Can you tell? There's 3 nonconformist chapels in the area, plus various churches and a school. And, you know, look at all these circles. And what I found funny, I'll just show you. This is what Star Corner looked like. So it was a row of shops in there. And so one of them obviously was selling alcohol. We had the greengrocers on the row of shops there. I don't think it exists anymore as it does. I think it's one of those areas of London that's been bulldozed and rebuilt. So yeah, so if you're into London and you know the map just goes out an incredible way. If you know the curvature of the Thames, you'll know where things are in London. There's a lot of pubs and a lot of places. If we just scroll in on the key here. So yeah, license houses, beer house, grocers with the license to retail, what we might call an off license in London, and the restaurants that sell beer but aren't a bar. So it might be worthwhile just going to look at it to see where your family's local church might have been, you know, especially if they were, you know, nonconformist, or even if they weren't. Even if they were Church of England. So it's a cool map that's up there. So that's what I found and learned about going up to the Auckland Expo. Has anybody had any inspiration since I started waffling on, that something they might like to share? No? Should we talk about the Kiwi Collection then? Kiwi Collection. We all know that it exists. So, of course, the big change to the Kiwi Collection was last December, where we, for the first time, were able to attach image files. And we started off with the First Families Collection and the Cemeteries Collection. And in July, we had the update. So it's only been about 4 or 5, 6 weeks ago. We're now up to 15.78 million records on the Kiwi Collection. So it's going up in leaps and strides, I have to say. And there are now over 120,000 images on there attached to various records. Now, usually when I'm talking about the Kiwi Collection, I'll put up a slide that looks like this, that summarises up all the ones that aren't the NZSG collections, although, as you can see up the top there, it does mention indexes to the NZSG collections. Now, when I was in Auckland, I played a sort of game of bingo, but it did get a bit tedious, so we're just going to skip through things and have a look at some of the things of what is in the Kiwi Collection. And so the first one in my not bingo tonight is my family ran a pub. And there are actually a few different collections in the Kiwi Collection. If you're in Auckland, Wellington or Canterbury, you might want to look at the Hokitika, the hotel or publican licenses, and then there's just a general one that says hotel license applications. Now, when you're in the Kiwi Collection, you can always click on the source button and it will open up the page that tells you all about the collection if the title is looking a bit vague. And sometimes the titles do look a bit vague. The other one that I found was gaming licenses in the Bay of Plenty. Now, that might also be attached to a pub or a hotel. The next one I had was my family got married. We have a lot of marriage records. These are the ones that I kind of put into a general category. The ITMs at the top are not your local timber merchant. They are the intentions to marry held by Archives New Zealand in Wellington. So what's interesting about our index is it also includes people who didn't get married. So Jill Knox, who's one of my predecessors on the board here in Wellington, tells of finding an intention to marry where the vicar turned up and the bride didn't look very enthusiastic, so he just didn't marry them. And there may be, you know, a story like that to be found in your family tree, because people might not have been wanting to tell it. And as you can see, there are various other ones, including our pre-1856 marriage collection, which has been put up with images. And then there are ones that are more specific. So you notice these are all church records for the most part. And if you're having issues trying to track down a civil registration or you want to find information from the parish registers, these are some of the collections that we have on them. And then lastly, there are what I would call the eclectic collections. So you might have a family member who was a Wanganui collegiate old boy. And then you can find out who he married. We have World War I war brides and a small but increasing collection on New Zealanders who married overseas. And of course, wedding anniversaries from the Otago Daily Times. So that might give you some idea of when somebody got married if they're celebrating a significant anniversary. The next one I did was my ancestor was an alien. And of course, I think you're a savvy enough crowd to know that I'm not talking about little green men. We have some alien records from 1917, which is a really peak period, you know, over 100 years ago, if you like to say, about what was happening with people who were considered to be aliens. We also have a miscellaneous one, which is full of miscellaneous things, and the naturalization records. We also have some more country-specific records. So you can see we have records relating to Hungary, Poland, Portugal, Sweden, and Switzerland. So that might be something that helps you make that leap back to a home country or an originating country, which that wasn't home, here was home. Another one that I put up was my ancestor was a nurse. Now, some nurses, unfortunately, were killed, so there are some on the cenotaph collection. There is the Christchurch Nurses Memorial Chapel, and then, of course, war. You know, it is a fact of life that nurses are very much in demand during a war. And we even have a World War II one for embarkation rolls. So that's a more modern records. And then there were sort of more eclectic ones. So nurses who died in the flu epidemic, which, you know, unfortunately many did. Howrah Hospital nursing graduates. And I don't know if there's actually any nurses in the Wellington Free Ambulance staff, but it could be that the story got a bit muddled on the way to you. So that might be something to have a look into. My ancestor died. This one is just huge. Cemetery records. So I've started off and put the cemetery collection in there, but we have a large number of cemeteries in this collection. And in total, I think it makes 8 slides. And you think you get to Wellington and you've got to the end, but no, there's another slide full of ones. Now, these are in alphabetical order, not geographical order or anything like that. So you might find something interesting. Plot purchases, that's always, you know, follow the money. That can lead you interesting places. We also have death records, so records of when people died. We have funeral records. So, of course, there's the funeral service sheet collection, which is a more modern collection of it. We also have undertaker records, and they're quite interesting because they have all sorts of useful information, and you can get the full lowdown on what's on them from research services when you find a name on there. There are memorials, of course, to people who have passed away, usually in war or in the case of the Brunner Mine Memorial, because of some disaster. And of course, the Hawke's Bay earthquake I put in there because it's good to remember those that died there too. And then we have death notice and obituaries, which we have a lot of. So we have our obituaries collection, which is kind of an overarching collection, and it does include many of these newspapers, which have listed here individually. And of course, there are people who died in war. So we have various World War I listings. Deaths in other forces or New Zealanders serving in Australian forces killed at Gallipoli, though those might be useful because, of course, we all know of stories where people couldn't get into the army here in New Zealand and they jumped the ditch, or they went back to family in England and decided to enlist in the British Army. So, you know, tracking them down sometimes can be the hard part. And then there are other. A lot of these seem to relate to accidental deaths, like drownings and railways, and the unfortunate victims of the Seacliff fire, as well as those who died in the influenza pandemic. So there is quite a multitude of different things in that particular set there too. Now, I think we're near the end of this presentation. My family lived in Foxton. I quite like Foxton. It's got a lovely windmill. But the folks up in that way have been busy, so they have transcribed the Anglican baptisms and marriages, as well as the Salvation Army marriages and promotion to glories. So this, if this is where your family was, and this is just an example of, a small geographical area having a lot of records done by enthusiastic local members. So, you might find that the area you're looking in also has that sort of level of records available to you. And so just a reminder, if you want to get there quickly, if you write genealogy.org.nz/Kiwi, it will take you to the page. If you want to subscribe to the Kiwi, you need to go into the shop and click on the subscription products. You will need to be logged in, of course. And that leaves me to my questions slide. So I'll stop sharing and see if there's any questions about anything I've just rattled off very quickly. Seen anything, Denise?
With the Salvation Army things, there's something, whatever it was, to glory. Is that deaths?
I don't know off the top of my head. Yes, it is. Okay. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
So I will need to also put that one in my ancestor died collection as well. It's interesting. Yeah. Thanks, Di. Any questions or things that people have found on the Kiwi collection you might like to add in?
When you find something in the Kiwi collection and you have to approach another group, what sort of donation is expected, or what sort of donation do you give to, as far as the amount of money, to other groups when they go out of their way to go and get this information for you?
It's generally, I think, as a rule, about $5, but it is dependent on what they've done for you. So, I mean, our branch at Kilburnie has offered to do lookups at Archives New Zealand, and I have to say people are being very generous, but if it's not within your means, then, just a token to say thank you is good. I mean, we've had overseas people do it, and that gets a bit complicated, so we've said, donate it to your local group. Because, by the time you've paid the bank charges, you might as well have given them a little bit of money. So, yeah, and it is appreciated. It acknowledges that it's, somebody has done a little bit of work for you. Di, have you got a question? You can turn your cameras on. I can't see anybody except Denise, and I'm going to see her on Saturday all day.
If you're lucky. Look at all these people appearing.
Right, Di, did you have a question or a comment?
A comment about the Kiwi collection. I went on it just recently, like in the last few months, and I just typed in the name McIndoe, which is on my father's side of the family, and it came up that there was a Mr. McIndoe purchased a plot in the West Tyree Cemetery near Dunedin, out at Outram, in 1879. And I was actually quite intrigued with this, but it's August 1879. And I went on the Dunedin City Council website for their burials, and there was nothing for it. But I actually have a death certificate for my great-grandfather's eldest sister, and she died on the 11th of July in Gore, and she was buried in West Tyree. Now, there's no record on the Dunedin website for her burial, but the day, the date of the purchase was 4 days later, and Mr. McIndoe would have been her father. And so I contacted the Anderson Bay Cemetery, and they said, well, no, it's an empty block. And I said, well, I find that rather strange, because I've got this death certificate, and I've got, he purchased the plot. And they said, well, when it stops raining, we will send somebody out to test the grave. So a few days later, I get a reply back from them saying, yes, they tested it. There could be a single grave in there, but they weren't sure. And they said to confirm it, they would have to it'd have to be exhumed.
Oh.
And I just said, I'm just going to leave her in peace. She had a terrible marriage, and I'll just leave her in peace. But to me, that she is buried in that plot. That's her.
Yeah.
They said it was going to be empty, and then they said, oh no, they had their sound equipment and were able to confirm that there could have been a body. And I thought, after 140 years, she needs to be left in peace. So to me, and I only found out about that purchase of the grave because of the Kiwi Collection.
That's a great success.
It was awesome.
Well, my problem is I've been looking in the cemeteries collection at who's buried in the plots that I've found records for burying in Barbados Street, and I'm just scratching my head now because they seem to have bought 2 plots, but they might have been double plots, but they don't. I don't know, it looks like 3 plots, and it's sort of, I know who 2 of them are, but who the other 3, and the headstone has sheared off, so that on one of them you just can't read it at all. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, but you should never sort of underestimate who's getting buried with whom, because my great-great-grandfather bought a plot, as did his brother, and there's no dates on the purchasing book for Barbados Street, which is a bit annoying, but another of their brothers and his wife died in 1872, and then the brother lost his wife, and then there was his daughter and my great-great-grandfather are buried in the same plot. But it's all just making my head spin a bit about who's actually where and what headstone still survives and all these sorts of things. So, but it's fascinating to see that they can actually go out and check if you.
Yes, I was quite stunned actually.
Yeah.
But talking about headstones, because someone is named on a headstone does not mean that they are buried in that plot. Because I have on my mother's side, her great-grandmother is actually buried in Milton, but her husband moved to Matara afterwards, and she is named on his headstone, but she's actually in the Milton Cemetery.
We see, I've had the opposite of that. I've had someone who was named on a headstone that people thought had died somewhere else, until I found a newspaper article saying that he'd come home and promptly dropped dead. So,
wow.
they didn't quite put it like that, but that's the edited condensed version of what happened. So yeah, and it does pay to check these things to find out if there is a burial record for the people that are alleged to be in there because, yeah.
I found a distant relative buried in the Karori cemetery with a substantial headstone and well engraved. And what Di had referred to, he was actually mentioned on the same grave that his wife was buried in at Hawera, but he had died in Wellington Hospital. And you can't, they didn't carry bodies around the country in these days. And so there he is, and we had the photograph, we had the burial records and everything, and we took them to the family, and they didn't believe us because for years and years and years they'd had him in the ground with his wife. We just had to leave the pictures and the information with them to let it settle.
Yeah, it can be hard. I mean, I discovered that my great-grandmother had been cremated in Karori, but her ashes were interred in her mother's grave in Christchurch, which I found accidentally when I was just stuck the family name into the Christchurch
Yes.
burial.
Well, much cheaper to move the ashes than to move a body.
Yeah, but it does make me wonder what happened to my great-grandfather because he died like 6 months later. I don't know where his ashes ended up.
Oh, right.
I might have to ask my uncle next time I see him.
Talking about Barbados Cemetery, we pass there quite often, and every time I say, pity we don't know anybody there. So if you do have a particular headstone you want us to go and look at, we're the ones to ask. Sarah.
Oh, thank you, Leslie. I also have a cousin who lives
Right, good.
on the next street. So when I was looking through my photos from my last trip to Christchurch, going, why didn't I take a picture of that grave?
Yes.
I politely requested, could you go and take a picture of that grave? But it was the slab, it's sheared off. And whether it's the front of it's face down in the dirt somewhere buried, I don't know. Next time I go down, I'll take a trowel with me and have a dig, see what we can find.
All sorts of things happened with the earthquake. Some places, 4 pieces that have fallen off have been turned over so you can read what's on them. But,
yeah, no, my 3 times great-grandparents in Addington Cemetery, they must have had a very tall one and it broke into 3 pieces. So the bottom bit's still sort of standing there. And one bit's the right way up and the other bit's the wrong way up. So it's on my monumental masons when I win lotto list.
Oh, do you have it?
of having it fixed, along with having all the other people that don't have anything on their graves around various bits of care debris having it. I mean, my 3 times great-grandmother, her son has a plaque on, they've got a double plot there on the edge of Addington Cemetery. So her son's got a plaque because he predeceased her, but she doesn't have one. And 2 of her baby granddaughters who also died very young are in there, and there's no thing for them either. So need to win lotto to afford to, hire a monumental mason for a couple of weeks and say, right, here's my list.
It's quite important in a will, I think, to leave some information about where you want to be buried if you have specific, because then whoever is the trustee for that will needs to see that happens. If there's no direction, relatives quite often decide to save the money.
Yeah, I mean,
It's costly to add to a stone or to put another plaque on or something like that. If they're not legally tied to do it, they quite often don't bother. I'm sure you all know that as well as I do.
Yes.
I need to tell you, we had a wonderful meeting last night.
With Dr. K.
Yes, very well attended. I don't know what the numbers were. We didn't know a lot of the people who were there, so it was advertised widely. And it was an absolutely marvellous meeting. Talking about negative space, searching in the negative space.
Yeah.
Did you
So that's an interesting thing. So negative space is about when you don't find something, when you think that it ought to be there.
Yes, when there are gaps, then how can you think creatively to fill those gaps up? And the example she gave was of John Mahey, which she said was a simple example because I want everyone in the room to be able to follow what I'm doing. But she had no idea what had happened to him in Bury in Lancashire for between two censuses. I was dying to tell her, hey, we haven't got censuses here, because that was a difference.
That's why you need school records.
Then
on
when
Kiwi
she-
Collection.
When she said that they'd found a baby born a year after the marriage, and then another baby born 12 years later, if I hadn't been wearing a mask because I've got a cough, I would have put up my hand and said, where are the babies in between? Because that's the first thought I would have had. And then she found 6 babies born in Belfast, because it was the time of the troubles with the cotton famine, it was called, in Lancashire, where they couldn't sell their cotton. It was the cotton manufacturing centre. And they'd obviously moved to Ireland for that period of time and then moved back again. So they had the first and the last baby at Bury and all the ones in between at Belfast. But immediately, I thought, where are the babies? Because especially if a baby came in the first year, that means they can have babies easily. So they're likely to follow at least every second year in that period of time.
Yeah.
But that was quite fascinating, what you were saying, just sort of working through. But finding out in that case about the cotton famine, when suddenly so many of the workers in Bury were working in the cotton factories and suddenly they were out of work. And
So what time period was that? Because I have family from the Lancashire Mills areas. Do you remember off the top of your head?
I think the 1870s, but
All right.
it's only think. You'll probably be able to
Google.
look at her talk. She giving out. You could look at the talk, all her talks.
Yes, I've got the link somewhere for her notes.
Yeah.
So.
Or you could Google it yourself and find out the cotton famine in Lancashire. And so the bottom just fell out of the market for a period of time.
Yeah.
And most of the people who lived in that area were working in the cotton factories.
Yeah,
Anyway,
mine were.
and she said was giving an example for which she could resolve things, so that people, if they were just starting doing family history, would be able to stay with, follow it and get something. But it was certainly challenging to think into the spaces of what should be there, what could be there in that time, in that place, and then that directing where you did your investigations.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's working out. When you've got the space, where did they go?
I was quite encouraged by the fact that I'm looking at Alfred Helps, who arrived in New Zealand with his wife and family in 1858. And where did he live in New Zealand? And in developing a story, I'm finding out bits, and I felt I was exploring the negative space. I was sort of living it from what I was doing at the moment. So I knew where he landed, but so I looked at electoral rolls, as Fiona Brooker encouraged us to do a few years ago. So you sort of found, but then in the early days you were on the roll because you had land, so you didn't necessarily live there. You could have moved away from there. But then one of the exciting things of the last couple of days was going on to the Alexander Turnbull Library, which of course, as an ex-Wellingtonian, I know so well. And I knew that the Helps family had letters which somebody had lodged there. And if I was in Wellington, I'd be there on the bus tomorrow, the train and the bus to see them. But I went on there and I just put in Alfred Helps. And I don't know how many things I got, because several hours later I stopped looking. But every time Alfred Helps was in a newspaper, and he was in business. He was a bailiff in Nelson for many years, and then an auctioneer in Parongia in the Waikato. And every advertisement in the paper, in papers past, was there when I searched just on Alexander Turnbull Library. I didn't go into papers past myself, but come up, and there was a button, article in papers past, press here, and I press it, and there was the article. It didn't tell me what date it was and send me to search for it. There was the article. I went out of that article, moved on to the next one. By goodness me, Papers Plus has grown up while I've been sleeping or something. The last
Well,
two,
I'll tell you a little secret because you're all here. The text correction is starting soon. Watch out in your e-kits. But yes, we've been asked how can we spread the word, so it's coming.
how is Emerson? Is Emerson Bandy still with Papers Past? Do you know?
He's kind of in there somewhere, but there's a new young man. God, I'm making myself sound old and him sound very young. But Jason,
Happens.
yeah,
Well,
Jason, and I'll remember
Emerson
his last name at some point. But he's
Emerson
been.
Bandy was one of the ones who dreamed the whole thing through, and he was just on annual contract, and he was the brains of it all. And he didn't know from one year to the next if his contract would be extended. We found it hard to believe. Because we were in a Wellington branch, in the Porirua in our case, we had him as a speaker, and we went talks at the National Library. So we were well familiar with him and knew him as a friend in the genealogy world. And the thought that he didn't have a secure tenure was hard to accept. But I imagine that if he's not right at the centre of it still, that he's very excited about what's happening.
I think he's, gone up a layer, if you get what I mean.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think he is still there somewhere, but I haven't seen him in a while. But yeah, they obviously have embraced Papers Past because last year was the 21st birthday, and they had a number of talks that were quite interesting on it.
But just have that link, just by putting in the going to the Alexander Turnbull Library Centre. Now that's where Papers Past belongs. That's where it started, and then just putting the name into their search box.
Yeah, you can also search it on Digital NZ. It doesn't have everything because it would completely take over Digital NZ, but it is one of the content providers on that website, which is also very useful for finding random things. I usually use it for images, but it also includes all sorts of things on it. Digital content.
I'm sure we've all used Papers Past by going directly to Papers Past, but this was a different thing that took me to a lot of records very, very quickly. And I began to see all the negative space of Alfred Helps filled up.
Oh, that's wonderful.
With all the things that I saw. And so he was a bailiff from right through till 1875, when I saw a reference in Papers Past in the Evening Post, not in Nelson, in Wellington, of course, and was to say somebody in a government report had put they didn't agree to Alfred Helps being given another position as a bailiff anywhere else, as the boss, I can't remember what the boss's title was, so I will refrain from using any title, what was the word? They'd stopped his employment because of complaints. So that put another thing on it. 1875. Then I knew why he appeared at Martin. And then why did he appear at a place called Alexandra, which became Parongia, near Te Awamutu. And then it's all fallen into place. So there is no negative space there. Now, a lot of my problems were caused by the fact that his first son had exactly the same name. And he was in electoral rolls too when he was old enough. And where were the two of them moving and trying to separate them out? But all these Paper Past things enabled me to sort it out. So, very good. We are, Peter's stepmother is going to be 100 on September the 21st.
Oh, wow, that's a milestone.
Her maiden name was Helps, which is why I'm looking at the Helps family, which is not my family, which is what you do when you're a genealogist, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Stop yourself. And I said, well, maybe the Helps family know all about it, but the Anderson family, we're Andersons. So Judith was a widow and she married Peter's father. And so the Anderson family, who are frequent visitors to Judith and Hamilton, can talk with her more about facts with her family, because at 100 years old, she's better at talking about the past than the present.
Yeah. Well, Rodney was saying he once took his granddaughter up to visit her great-grandmother up in New Plymouth, and Rodney's mum made it to 101, I believe. And he said it was fascinating. She asked questions that it never would have occurred to me to ask. So sometimes, taking along, and I think she was maybe 10 or 11 at the time, maybe a bit younger. So, taking one of your grandies up to see, your
We haven't got any little ones now. They're all adults.
I know. So they don't get any smaller.
But our daughter was up there for a diamond wedding at the weekend, and she had 2 long visits to her step-grandmother that were of very high quality. In the morning was better, and we were meant to be there, but something called COVID prevented us going.
Oh dear.
And missed out on Peter's sister's diamond wedding, so at the last minute, very sad.
Oh, these things happen at the moment, don't they?
But Vivian was there, and I think that all people will understand that the bride of 60 years ago lost her daughter to cancer in 2008, and Vivian went to be the extra niece to take the place of the daughter. So bless her. That was good.
Oh, that's nice.
She went and worked to make it happen. Anyway,
So has anybody else got anything they would like to add to this evening's discussion before I sort of start winding it up? If you're in the Wellington region, and I say that within 2 hours of Wellington, and I mean
it's on the train, 16 minutes on the
train. Yeah, exactly.
Where
60 minutes on the plane. Saturday is our Family History Month event. Fiona Brooker's coming up from Christchurch to speak to us.
And we've had Luke Howison in Christchurch, and people must go to hear him if they haven't. For New Zealand Ancestor Search Helper, the most marvellous website that he created to keep himself busy in COVID shutdown. A very, very clever young man.
And he's launched a new one called archway.howison.co.nz, which gives you search results like Archway used to, which tells you he's lovely. I had a big chat with him at the expo in Auckland. I sat down next to him and he said, "I've seen you on YouTube." And I went, "Oh God, I hope not." But on one of these videos. So he'll have seen all of you guys on YouTube because he seems to watch our videos. So yeah, he's done an amazing job.
When he came to Christchurch, there was a big gathering of people from all over. And he said nothing excited him more than being with genealogists. And he's a young father, husband and father of a young family. And he just said, it's so wonderful being with all these people that are interested in what I'm interested in. And he's so humble about what he's been able to do. So if any of you have not Googled New Zealand Ancestor Search Helper, please do, and you'll be excited. He draws records from all over the place and has them in one place. Exact dates of births, marriages, and weddings available.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. So if you're in the Wellington area, yet another plug, Saturday, Tawa Union Church, doors opening at 9:30, going through till I think 4:30 off the top of my head. But it will be an action-packed day, and you'll even get to see me.
Sarah, I see you're speaking, but the advertising did not have anywhere on the page, I've looked at it again and again, where it was at. And the only place where that was on the heading of the email when it came in. That was the only place I could find the word Tawa, and I lived there for 43 years and I know how it's spelled. It was absolutely missing from their beautiful poster.
Oh, okay. Well, we've been putting it out there, so hopefully people will know where to find us.
Oh, the poster's here behind this screen that I'm looking at with you. It's right there, I see. And it says what date it is, but it doesn't say where it is.
Oh, okay. I'll have a look at that.
A big plug for the mem list, genealogy mem list, email list. Absolutely amazing seeing how people are helped so much to solve problems. And a young friend of ours asked some questions within the last week, and some of our big experts around New Zealand came in with so much help. I'm sure he's a lot further on his way with his family history. It's just amazing how quick people respond and how careful they are about the answers they give.
There's definitely a great group on the mem list. And yes, if you need help, it's a great thing to belong to. And if you want to give help, it's also a great thing to belong to, because you can.
And you can easily delete the ones that are not of interest to you very quickly.
Yes, or you can get it as a daily digest, which is how I get it. So people, that's one option. Righty-ho, well, I'm going to wrap things up now. It's fast approaching 8 o'clock, so thank you all for coming along. It's been an interesting evening to hear from various people. And Di, would you like to write your little story up for eKit? Because we do need some success stories from the Kiwi Collection, little things like that.
And our speaker last night said how marvellous it is to talk with other genealogists in any context you can. And she said, you need to do it. It's a social connection. You're helping each other. You're helping each other in more ways than you know. So thank you for all you're doing for us, Sarah.
Oh, no. Well, thank you guys all for coming along. So I have no idea. I get to the end of these things, and this year I'm supposed to know what I'm saying next month, but I can't remember what it is tonight. But anyway, keep an eye on your eKit, and we'll see what we're talking about in September. There's a few little things in the works that we might do in particular, or we might do a few things. There's lots of things happening, but and a reminder, the magazine's also in the works, so that should be out in just over a week on the website once it's been put together, which hasn't yet, but nothing like a deadline to get us moving. So there'll be some interesting things.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
So that Sarah can go home.
It's gone dark in Queensland.
I will then share my screen, because I learnt a few things in the last week going up to the Auckland Expo.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.